All right, here we are again for part 2. Before we jump into Photoshop, I'm going to talk a little bit about the art part of the lesson that we'll be structuring our assignment on. This is going to be a very simple art concept that I'm going to teach, and it's about the word values. Now, values mean a bunch of things. In art, it just means how light or dark something is. Pretty simple. You have over here dark value. This is like a medium, and this is a light. And of course, this is always depending on how dark or light its surroundings are. So this looks dark compared to these two, but in another picture, this with black values, this may seem the lightest part of it. So we can use the values to organize your picture into areas of dark, medium, and light. This goes for color as well as grayscale images. For simplicity's sake, in this lesson, I'm just going to talk about grayscale. In your project, you can definitely use color, but we are still going to stick to this idea of dark, medium, and light organizing. Why would we organize our images into dark, medium, and light? The answer is to help communicate our ideas better, but it'd be easier for me to show you so you see what I mean. When you put different values next to each other, it creates something called contrast. The values are very different from each other in the first one, which creates what they call high contrast. In fact, black and white, these are opposites. This is as dark as you can get. This is as light as you can get. So this is a lot of contrast. They're very different. Contrast basically means difference. You can interchange those words. If I take a light and a dark value that are very similar to each other, this creates a low difference or low contrast. They're much more similar to each other than these two. And as you can see, that has an effect on your eye. This is more subdued, more relaxing, more peaceful, more muted, and this grabs your attention. If, in fact, looking at this page, this almost jumps off the page and this kind of fades back. You notice it, but it's not as noticeable as this. Okay? We can use contrast to control our attention. We can take high contrast details and put them around the main idea of your picture. This will ensure that people notice your main subject of your image. And that should be different than everything else. If you make high contrast everywhere, it can be confusing, which you can do to achieve that effect. But you shouldn't have contrast and value mistakes where you don't want them to be. You have to at least be aware of them. You can break these rules all you want, but you need to be aware of them so people aren't accidentally paying attention to the wrong things in your art. Or it can take a nice image, but it loses a lot of its impact. If you use this idea, you can really, really improve the impact of your artwork, okay? So here's a very simple example. I use this with my young kids in elementary school. I try to tell them which shape is more important, and they all have different opinions for different reasons. This is very high contrast. It's black and white. Now I'm talking about value contrast, dark and light, but you can have shape contrast, size, you can have contrast of anything. But we're talking about value contrast, light and dark. So if we put low contrast details in less important areas, you can have lots of details that aren't too distracting. Too little contrast everywhere will have the same effect. No one will be sure where to look. You have to focus people's attention in certain places. And value is one of the most important ways to do that, probably even more so than color. Here's another one. What shape is more important? This is all low contrast. Again, same problem. You don't really know. Now, if I add an area, since it's mostly low contrast, if I add an area of high contrast, you instantly are drawn to that shape. You can't help but pay attention to this now. That is the simplest expression of what I'm talking about. Right? So now don't read the homework challenge. That is not what we are doing. Here is, okay, now I'm in Photoshop. And again, I'm going to use grayscale to keep it simple. But in your project, you can use color. This is just an example about value and why we use it to organize our images. So here is an image I made really, really quickly. It looks very scribbly because it basically is. I used a lasso tool and just drew shapes really quickly and filled them in with different shades of gray and black and white. And it's my sky, my sun, my mountains with trees and a couple houses and some snow or something here. And then there's a road coming down and either a person or a rock or something sticking up here. And there's bushes over here and a lake shore and some more bushes over here and some trees at the foot of the mountains. There's just a lot of details going on, and they're messy, but there's a lot of details. The problem is it is very haphazard in how I put values next to each other. It's exciting to look at, but at the same time, I'd say it's kind of, it's almost just kind of upsetting because you're noticing things, but your eye keeps moving around and it doesn't know where to settle. I'm noticing things a lot, like over here. I look at these a lot, these little bushes. But let's say that's not at all what I wanted to do. Let's say I was illustrating a book about a story about a wizard who was taking a trip through the mountains. I don't think most people would get the idea. They might, but they might not. All right? And not just because it's a messy drawing. So let's start over again, and let's take the most basic idea and break it down into light values, medium values, and dark values. It doesn't have to be white and black and middle gray. It just has to be 3 different values. And let's just simplify it. So I have my wizard here. Just looks like a lump. My lake's going to be here. My ground, my mountains, and my sky, and my road. Now that is very, very clear. There's no detail, but it's very clear. And the thing I want people to pay attention to the most was a wizard walking through the mountains down a road. So I made the road the lightest value, and I made the wizard the darkest value, and I put them next to each other. So this area here where the white and the black are clashing together, that is where your eye is going to be drawn to the most. These have contrast, but they're not as extreme as this. The lake is lighter than the ground, but it's not as big a contrast as the road next to the ground. So we have gray and black, not as jarring as the white and the black. Same with the mountains, gray and the white. They're more like neighbors on the value scale, but the total opposites are my main area right here. Problem is I had tons of details in this image, and I still want tons of details here without it getting crazy, upsettingly out of whack. So one thing you can do is all the details I want to put here, the trees, the snow, the houses, the shadows, all of that, they can still go here. However, the light and the medium and the dark have to match this middle value. So the middle value of this will be the middle value of the details. The light value of the details won't be white. There'll be a lighter gray that's still in the neighborhood of this gray. The dark won't be as dark as this, but it will be in this medium darkness. Same thing with the dark. We'll have dark areas that are even darker and a little bit lighter. We'll have areas in the lake that are a little darker and a little lighter. In the road, there'll be areas that are a little bit darker and a little bit lighter. Some parts may be pure white. So if we do that, this is the original. Hectic details everywhere. We're going to add the same amount of details, but keep them restrained within their values. So I'm going to do it the same level of details. That is the same level of detail. We still have light parts of the mountain, trees, houses, exactly the same, but they're staying within the range. Here's the bushes are a little bit darker than the dark, and the highlights are a little bit lighter than the lights. But they're not so bright as to mess up this value exchange here. So that reads a lot simpler, a lot easier to understand what's going on here than it is here. And I hope that makes sense. I keep the ranges within each value. So it's like light, middle, and dark within the dark, light, middle, and dark within the white, and light, middle, and dark within the middle. So there's our little mini art lesson for you to try. And again, this works with color. This works with everything. I just picked grayscale to keep it simple because color can be distracting and confusing when you're teaching this idea. But you can still do it. All right. So we're going to be making an image using this idea of details within a light, medium, and dark. I'll show you one more thing, and then we'll move on to another video. My computer's a little slow when I go to open things. All right. Here are some documents. Cancel. I'll do it in the next video. I had more examples, but hopefully that's enough. I think we'll stop it here and we'll move on to actually what you are going to be doing for your assignment. Your next assignment is really going to start on the next video.